It was supposed to be a fairy tale, high school sweethearts, a picture-perfect marriage, a love built to last. But behind closed doors, the cracks were spreading. And when a beautiful, powerful woman stepped into his life, that love story twisted into something dark, something deadly. By the end, 2 women lay dead, a man's lies unraveled, and a single question lingered. Could this tragedy have been stopped before it was too late? This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of obsession, revenge, and the terrifying moment someone snaps. The warning signs were there, but no one saw them in time. This is Vic's True Crime Stories. Let's unravel the case that proves even the most ordinary lives can hide the darkest secrets. Picture this, a young man hopelessly smitten, his heart racing every time she walked into the room. Mark and Jenna, high school sweethearts in every sense of the word. He was head over heels from a start, but Jenna, she took her time. For long years passed before she finally said yes to a date with him. And when she did, Mark must have felt like the luckiest man alive. Because let's be honest, Jenna was stunning, confident, the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. And Mark? Well, let's just say his friends probably joked that she was way out of his league. But love doesn't care about leagues, does it? In 1993, they tied the knot, promising forever in front of their friends and family. No children, just the 2 of them and their dogs, a little family built on laughter and shared dreams. To everyone looking in, they had it all. The kind of couple you'd see holding hands at barbecues, finishing each other's sentences, the envy of their friends. For years, it really did seem like they were living the dream. South Carolina was home, a place where the air was thick with warmth, both from the sun and the life they'd built together. But time has a way of changing things. By 2017, the arguments started. Money was tight, and when money gets tight, patience wears thinner. The kind of fights where words sting a little too much, where silence after feels heavier than the yelling. Still, they pushed forward. Mark landed a new job, a fresh start, a chance to turn things around. Only catch? It was in Delaware. Jenna stayed behind just long enough to pack up their life in South Carolina, ready to follow her husband into this new chapter. What she didn't know, the moment she wasn't by his side, someone else was about to walk into the picture, and nothing would ever be the same again. Delaware was supposed to be a fresh start, a new job, a new city, a chance for Mark and Jenna to leave their troubles behind. But life has a funny way of twisting plans when you least expect it. Mark arrived first, settling into his new role, while Jenna stayed behind to wrap things up in South Carolina. And that's when she walked into his life, Meredith Chapman. Meredith wasn't just another co-worker. She was younger, ambitious, the kind of woman who commanded attention without even trying. At 32, she'd already run for state senate, been named one of Delaware's most promising leaders under 40. She was everything Mark found intoxicating: confidence, success, a smile that made him forget the fights waiting for him back home. And the way she looked at him, like he was someone worth admiring, something Jenna hadn't made him feel in a long time. It started innocently enough, long conversations, shared laughs, the kind of easy rapport that makes hours feel like minutes. Then came the night they stayed late for drinks. For hours slipped by as they talked about everything. Their dreams, their frustrations, the marriages that no longer felt like love stories. Meredith confessed she was only staying with her husband out of convenience. Mark admitted he didn't know if he and Jenna even liked each other anymore. And then, in a moment charged with something neither could ignore, they kissed. That kiss was the spark. What followed was a full-blown affair, reckless and hungry. Mark turned down better job offers just to stay near Meredith. He told her he loved her. They made plans. Once his divorce was final, they'd be together properly. No more hiding. But while Mark was lost in this new, dizzying romance, Jenna was packing up their life in South Carolina, completely unaware that the man she was about to move across the country for had already given his heart to someone else. The moment Jenna arrived in Delaware, she knew. Maybe it was the way Mark hesitated before hugging her, the way his phone was always face down, the way he'd disappear into another room to take calls. Small things, barely noticeable to anyone else, But to a woman who'd spent over 2 decades learning every flicker of his expressions, they were neon signs flashing the same ugly truth. Her husband wasn't hers anymore. And Jenera? She wasn't the type to let a mystery go unsolved. Jenera wasn't stupid. She'd known Mark since they were teenagers, could read him like a book she'd memorized. And this new version of her husband? The one who suddenly needed late nights at the office and came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers? That wasn't her Mark. Every unanswered call, every text left unread, every time he turned his phone away when she walked into the room, they were all little paper cuts adding up to one bleeding truth. So Jenera did what any woman who'd built a life with someone for 25 years would do. She went to war, not with screaming or accusations. No, she was smarter than that. She became a ghost in Mark's life, silently watching, waiting for the slip-up she knew would come. First came the GPS tracker, slipped under his car bumper. Then the tiny recording devices, sewn into jacket linings, tucked into briefcase corners. She learned how to mirror his phone, watching messages pop up in real time on her own screen hundreds of miles away in South Carolina. Imagine sitting alone in that empty house they'd shared, watching dots move across a map on her laptop. Mark's car stopping at an apartment complex at 9:17 p.m. Still there at midnight. Still there at 2 a.m. The receipts she found later. Charges for romantic dinners at restaurants he told her he hated. Hotel rooms booked on afternoons when he was supposedly in back-to-back meetings. But the real smoking gun came on Valentine's Day, of all days. While other couples were exchanging chocolates and roses, Jenera was sitting in their Delaware bedroom, hands shaking as she scrolled through months of deleted texts on Mark's hack phone. I miss you so much. Can't wait to touch you again. I love you more than anything. Messages sent while she was packing up their life to join him. Messages that painted a picture so clear, so ugly, she couldn't look away even though every word burned. February 14th, 2018. Valentine's Day. The irony wasn't lost on Jenera as she sat waiting for Mark to come home. While lovers everywhere celebrated with champagne and candlelight, she sat surrounded by printouts of text messages, credit card statements, and photos. All the proof she'd spent months collecting spread across their kitchen table, like pieces of a shattered marriage. The clock ticked louder with each passing minute. When the front door finally opened, Mark froze mid-step, his eyes darting from the evidence to Jenera's face. No happy Valentine's Day. No flowers. Just silence thick enough to choke on. Who is she? Jenera's voice barely rose above a whisper, but the words hit Mark like bullets. He could have lied, could have made excuses, but faced with months of his own betrayals laid bare, something in him snapped to. Not guilt, not exactly. More like relief. He told her everything. Meredith's name, how they'd met, how what started as harmless flirting had become something deeper. And then the words that would haunt Jenera long after this night was over. I love her. 3 syllables that destroyed 25 years in an instant. Jenera's hands shook as she listened to him describe a future that didn't include her. A future where he and Meredith would be together properly, without hiding. The worst part? He said it all with this quiet certainty, like their marriage had already been over for years and she just hadn't gotten the memo. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked under the weight of everything breaking inside her. Go to counseling with me. Just try. It wasn't a plea. It was a demand. The last stand of a woman who'd built her entire adult life around this man and wasn't ready to watch it burn without a fight. Mark agreed. Maybe out of pity. Maybe because walking away completely felt too cruel, even for him. But across town, Meredith was making moves of her own. While Jenera booked marriage counselors, Meredith filed for divorce from her husband. While Jenera planned date nights to rekindle their spark, Meredith packed boxes for a new home in Pennsylvania, waiting for the day Mark would finally be free to join her. The two women were playing very different games, one fighting for survival, the other already counting her winnings. What Meredith didn't understand, Jenera had already lost her husband, her marriage, her future. There was only one thing left she could lose, And that made her dangerous. Because when someone has nothing left to lose, that's when they become capable of anything. The harder Jennifer fought, the more obvious it became that she was losing. She'd catch Mark staring at his phone with that faint smile she hadn't seen directed at her in years. She noticed how his laughter sounded different now, warmer, freer. During phone calls, he'd take in another room. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night to find his side of the bed empty, Mark sitting in the dark living room, scrolling through messages that lit up his face in the glow of the screen. Her friends started noticing the changes too. The way Jennifer's hands wouldn't stay still during coffee dates, fingers constantly tapping, twisting her wedding ring around and around. How she'd abruptly stop mid-sentence, eyes locked on some point in the distance, as if she'd just remembered something terrible. The nervous habit she developed of checking her phone every 30 seconds, though it never seemed to bring her any relief when she did. Mark carried on with the charade, attending counseling sessions, nodding along as Jennifer tearfully recounted their happiest memories. But his mind was already in Pennsylvania with Meredith, counting down the days until the divorce was final. He didn't see what everyone else was beginning to notice, that Jennifer's grip on reality was slipping, that the woman he'd once loved was disappearing before his eyes, replaced by someone far more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose. Because when you push someone to the edge of everything they've ever known, there are only two ways they can go: fall, or take everyone down with them. April 23rd, 2018, the day the clock finally ran out. Mark sat alone at a restaurant table, checking his watch as the minutes ticked by. Jennifer was late, which wasn't like her. Then his phone buzzed. A text. Just a few words, but they hit him like a punch to the gut. "You ruined my life. I hope you never find happiness." No explanation. No argument. Just those 11 icy words. And then silence. What Mark didn't know, Jennifer wasn't stuck in traffic. She wasn't even in Delaware anymore. Her car was already cutting through the Pennsylvania backroads. Her hands gripping the wheel so tight her knuckles had gone white. She had one destination, Meredith's house. The place where the woman who'd stolen her husband now lived, free and happy, waiting for the divorce to finalize so she could have the life Jennifer had lost. Neighbors would later say they'd seen her before, a woman in sunglasses, sometimes a wig, lingering near Meredith's mailbox or pretending to check her phone across the street. But that night, no disguise, no hiding. Jennifer marched straight to Meredith's trash cans, digging through the contents like a woman possessed. And there it was, the proof she'd been dreading. Receipts, notes, enough to confirm what she already knew in her bones. Mark was still seeing Meredith, still lying, still choosing her. She snapped a photo of the evidence and sent it to Mark. No words this time, just the image, a final, silent accusation. Then she turned toward Meredith's front door. No knocking, no hesitation, just the creak of the door opening and the sound of footsteps on hardwood. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. Meredith had no idea what was coming. No idea that the woman she'd only ever heard about in whispers was now standing in her home, holding the weight of every betrayal in her hands. Outside, the neighborhood was peaceful. A dog barked in the distance. A car rolled slowly down the street. Then two sharp cracks split the air. Gunshots. Closed together. Final. By the time the first neighbor peeked out their window, it was already over. Inside that house, two women lay dead. One killed by a bullet, the other by a broken heart. And Mark? He was still sitting in that restaurant, staring at his phone, completely unaware that the life he knew had just ended in bloodshed. Because sometimes, when love curdles into something darker, it doesn't just break hearts, it destroys lives. When police arrived at Meredith's Pennsylvania home that night, they found a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned detectives. Two women, two gunshots, one revolver still clutched in Jennifer's hand. The perfect symmetry of the tragedy was almost grotesque. In the end, she made certain neither woman could have him. The man who'd promised to love them, both had lost them in a single violent instant. As investigators pieced together the final hours, neighbors came forward with stories that painted a disturbing picture. The woman in the blonde wig who'd been seen sitting in a parked car outside Meredith's house for hours at a time. The figure in dark clothing spotted rifling through trash cans late at night. The repeated phone calls to Meredith's landline where no one ever spoke. Jenner's descent into obsession hadn't been sudden. It had been methodical, calculated, and tragically visible to everyone except the two people who mattered most. The media frenzy was immediate and insatiable. News vans camped outside both crime scenes. Talk shows dissected every sordid detail of a love triangle. Pundits argued about whether Jenner was a victim or a monster, while psychologists debated how long the cracks in her psyche had been forming. But all eyes eventually turned to Mark, the man at the center of it all, now suddenly alone in the wreckage of his own making. In the months that followed, Mark did something that would ignite fresh outrage. He wrote a book, a memoir detailing his version of events, his grief, his guilt. The public response was volcanic. How dare he profit from this tragedy? How could he claim to mourn when his actions had set this horror in motion? Survivors of domestic violence, groups protested at his book signings. Meredith's family gave blistering interviews about his selfishness. Even Jenner's oldest friends broke their silence, describing how Mark's betrayal had eroded the vibrant woman they'd once known. The most damning criticism came from an unexpected source, the detective who'd worked the case. In a quiet moment off camera, he'd been overheard saying, "That man handed Jenner the gun piece by piece and acted shocked when she pulled the trigger." Whether Mark truly understood his role in the tragedy remained unclear. What was certain, he'd gotten exactly what he claimed to want, freedom from both women. But the cost had been higher than even he could have imagined. Because some stories don't have heroes or villains, just broken people making choices that can never be taken back. And sometimes, the weight of those choices is heavier than any one person can bear. 25 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, all of it shattered in an instant. But the real tragedy isn't just in what happened. It's in how easily it could have been avoided. The warning signs were there, plain as day, if anyone had cared to look. Mark's slow withdrawal, Jenner's quiet unraveling, Meredith's blind certainty that love conquers all. 3 lives collided with the force of a train wreck, and when the dust settled, no one was left standing. So where does the blame truly lie? With Jenner, who pulled the trigger, a woman who spent decades building a life with a man, only to watch him give his heart to someone else without a second thought? Or with Mark, who fed her just enough hope to keep her clinging on, even as he packed his bags in his mind? And what about Meredith? She knew he was married, knew Jenner had uprooted her life for him. Did she ever stop to think about the woman on the other side of those late-night texts? Love is supposed to be gentle, kind, something that lifts you up. But what happens when it twists into something else? When it becomes a weapon, sharpened by jealousy and swung with the full force of a broken heart? Jenner wasn't a monster. She was a woman who loved too hard, held on too tight, and when she finally snapped, the fallout was catastrophic. But here's the thing about snapping. It never happens without pressure. And the pressure had been building for years. Could Mark have stopped this? Absolutely. One honest conversation. One clean break. Instead, he dragged it out, letting Jenner dangle in that torturous space between hope and despair. And Meredith? She could have walked away, could have demanded he fix his mess before starting something new. But she didn't. She believed in their love story so fiercely that she never stopped to consider the collateral damage. In the end, this isn't just a story about an affair. It's about what happens when people treat love like a game, blind to the fact that real hearts are on the line. Jenner lost herself long before she lost her life. Mark lost both women the moment he decided he could have his cake and eat it too. And Meredith? She learned too late that some love stories don't end with a happily ever after. Sometimes they end with a gunshot. So the question remains, when does love stop being love and start being something far more dangerous? And more importantly, how do we keep ourselves from crossing that line? Love is supposed to be the one thing that saves us, the light in the dark, the hand that pulls us back from the edge. So how did it become the very thing that pushed Genera over? How did three ordinary people, flawed, human, searching for happiness, end up here? Two lives cut short. One man left standing in the wreckage of his own choices. And all of us left wondering, where does love end and destruction begin? Now it's your turn. What do you think? Could this have been stopped? Or was it always going to end in bloodshed? Was Genera a victim of betrayal? Or did she become the monster in her own story? Does Mark deserve the blame? Or was he just a man who fell out of love? The answers aren't simple. But that's what makes this case so chilling. Because it's not about villains. It's about real people, real pain, and the kind of heartbreak that doesn't just break you, it breaks everything around you. If this story got under your skin, you're not alone. Over on Vic's Crime Stories, we dig deep into the cases that leave us questioning humanity. The ones that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. So hit subscribe, because the darkest truths aren't the ones we read about. They're the ones we live through, and we'll be here uncovering them one story at a time. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.